Good morning and welcome. Most of you, I think, are probably coming from panel one, which was a great conversation. Similarly, I'm going to just show a couple of brief slides, and then we will put the slides away and jump into the conversation. So give me just a second to pull that up. All right, so this is panel two, diving deeper into social sciences and humanities postdoc needs. I'm joined today by four panelists, or three panelists. The fourth one will be joining us shortly. First, Dr. Alex Yen is the Program Director of Postdoctoral and Career and Professional Development at MIT. She oversees supporting postdoctoral scholars through career advising and professional development programs, emphasizing clarifying the hidden curriculum, aligning career and professional goals with values, and cultivating resources for healthy mentor-mentee relationships. Prior to joining MIT, Alex was a postdoctoral associate at Boston University's Professional Development and Postdoctoral Affairs Office. She received her MA and Ph.D. in Roman art and archaeology from the History of Art and Architecture Department at Boston University, and her BA in Archaeology and Art History from the University of Southern California. Dr. Blessing Enekwe is the Program Director for the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs at the University of Maryland, College Park, helping to establish the office in 2016. In her role, she serves to support professional skills development and community engagement through implementing programming and events. Blessing helps to support mentoring initiatives for graduate students, postdocs, and faculty through mentor training. Blessing received her PhD and BA in Government and Politics from the University of Maryland, College Park. Dr. Claire Perrot is the Professional Development Postdoctoral Fellow in the Office of Research at Syracuse University, where she leads the office's professional development and programming efforts, developing resources and coordinating events tailored to the Syracuse University postdoctoral community. Claire's work encompasses the pivotal task of connecting postdoctoral scholars with an array of campus resources, with a particular emphasis on fostering access to professional development opportunities. Claire provides comprehensive support to postdoctoral scholars, ensuring their success during their tenure at SU and as they prepare for their next stage of their career beyond Syracuse University. Claire received her MA and PhD in history at the University of Arizona and BA in Latin American Studies and Spanish at Lake Forest College. Dr. Jewel Pereyra, who will be joining us shortly, she's currently in a job interview, is a Society of Fellows postdoctoral scholar in an African American and Black diaspora studies at Boston University. Her research and teaching engaged 20th and 21st century Asian American and Afro-Asian diasporic literature and performance through relational ethnic studies frameworks, with a focus on histories of US empire and militarism, social and labor movements, and transnational feminisms. Her first book project, Afro-Filipina Aesthetics, Transnational Kinship Networks and Relational Performance, reorients scholarship on Afro-Asian social movements and military histories of the Black Pacific by amplifying Filipina and Black feminist and queer performance genealogies across the long 20th century. Jewel received her PhD in American Studies with a concentration in women, gender, and sexuality studies from Harvard University, her MA in English Literature at Georgetown University, and her BA in American Literature and Women's Studies from UCLA. And I'm your moderator, Robin Sugiura. I am the Director of Postdoctoral Training in the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs at Stanford University and a board member here at NPA. In my role, I develop and manage a suite of over 150 professional and personal development trainings annually for the 2,600 postdocs across all 7 schools at Stanford. I also lead Stanford's cutting-edge efforts to increase representation. Sorry, I lost my spot. And in developing and measuring interventions to cultivate a strong sense of belonging among the postdoc community. I received my BA in Japanese from UC Berkeley, MAs in Japanese literature, both from Waseda University in Tokyo and from Stanford, and left Stanford ABD to focus on having a greater impact on academia by driving cultural change through training future faculty leaders. So, slide, here we go. At Stanford, we're very fortunate to have access to very rich data about our postdoctoral scholars. So I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you as a means of context what career outcomes we see for postdoctoral scholars in these fields. 636 postdocs in social sciences and humanities completed their postdoctoral training at Stanford between the years of 2011 and 2022. Here are their career outcomes. As you can see, nearly 80% continue to academia, with the vast majority of these going directly into tenure-track faculty roles, either in primarily research or primarily teaching institutions. 10% moved into jobs in the for-profit sector, in roles that are directly related to their academic discipline or utilizing their research skills. The most prevalent job titles for folks in this sector include research scientist, research director, user experience researcher, data scientist, product researcher, founder or co-founder, and consultant. A much smaller proportion of these postdocs move into government or the nonprofit sector roles. I also wanted to share the data we have on time and training for the same population of 636 postdoctoral scholars in social sciences and humanities fields who completed their postdoctoral training at Stanford between 2011 and 2022. Though there is a very small variance in time and training by career sector, on average, postdoctoral scholars in social sciences and humanities spend 2 years as a postdoc at Stanford. With this context, I would like to turn to our panelists. So let's start with, I'd like to ask first, what do you see as the fundamental differences between postdoctoral training in the social sciences and humanity fields and STEM fields? And I'd like to invite Alex to get us started.
Thanks, Robin, and thanks to the NPA for organizing this amazing summit. Yes, so I think that it was very helpful for you to actually start out with that sort of pie chart showing the length of training, because I think one thing that is a big kind of concern we want to think about is about stability. So across the country, there's a lot of types of sort of postdoctoral kind of groups like Society of Fellows. There's one at USC, there's one at BU that Jules part of, but also many of the social sciences and humanities postdocs are department-based, and sometimes these are one-year appointments. So it's 1 year teaching, say, in the anthropology department to cover these courses while someone's on leave. And so because of that, someone is wrapping up their PhD and then they're moving, say, across the country to a postdoc that's 1 year, but then they're immediately on the job market, thinking about jobs if they're going on the faculty job market. And so there's some challenges in terms of the length of time still in terms of social science and postdoc humanities kind of postdoc training. And everyone else in my panel, feel free to kind of add on to thoughts about that.
I can hop in, thinking about kind of in the same vein, but just like the mode of work. So a lot of social science and humanities postdocs work sometimes independently, or especially if you compare it to STEM postdocs who might be, working at the bench alongside their PI, or at least their PI is, sometimes, more involved or in their office. Every postdoc is unique, every postdoc position. And sometimes social science and humanities postdocs can even work remotely because the nature of their work doesn't mean they need to be at a specific lab or on a specific campus. And so I think this is important to acknowledge and think about, because this relates to mentorship, how a postdoc is kind of adjusting to a new institution, how they're kind of feeling integrated within a campus or within the research community there, especially if they're not, physically present. And then, there's things also with like the mentoring, like how are mentors guiding these postdocs. And I think in STEM fields, what I've noticed is there's more of a tradition of using tools like an IDP, an individual development plan, whereas for social science and humanities postdocs, I ask about an IDP and neither the postdoc nor the mentor has ever even heard of this tool. And so, you know, you don't have to use an IDP, and there's lots of tools, and I think we're going to talk more about mentoring later. But these are just some of the differences that I'm kind of thinking about.
Just kind of along those veins, as we're thinking about how postdocs collaborate, particularly in the social sciences, it just comes about differently. I think many of us see that the work is often pretty independent. People might be working on a book, or working on specific chapters, but how do they really meet other people across the campus as they're, you know, trying to emphasize some of the work that they're doing, and trying to find those collaborations. And so as we're thinking about mentoring, which we will talk about quite a bit, but also as we're thinking about just getting the lay of a campus in a very short period of time, right? We already see they have usually around 2 years or less. So how do they really create some of those relationships that can help to build their research portfolio, and also just like them as a sense of as a scholar, an independent scholar.
Thank you. That's a great point. You know, I'd mentioned in the introduction that the career trajectories of social sciences and humanities postdocs, but I'm wondering how this impacts the research outputs required of them, as well as kind of what professional and career development they will need to be successful. And Alex, I'm going to invite you to get us kicked off again.
Sure, yeah. Actually, it's great that Blessing you were talking about articles, because I was thinking about also one of the things that's a bit distinctive from social science and humanities postdocs versus STEM postdocs is that many times, you know, the outputs is similar where you're trying to present, you want to write articles. But for social science and humanities, you're oftentimes the solo author for these. And that's really what you're writing when you're on the job market. You're talking about, you know, this article is the first chapter of my book manuscript. And that's how you frame it when you're on that faculty job market. But also, I think that it's really challenging to be able to think about what else are other types of kind of output that you can make? What else? Is it blog posts? Is it data sets? Are these like white papers, reports? And it's, I think, a challenge quite a bit to kind of think about how can you strategically translate your doctoral work into marketable skills when you're navigating the job market, which is oftentimes, I would argue, sometimes even more competitive in the humanities social sciences than in STEM fields.
Thanks. So thinking about that, let's think about the professional and career development that these people in these fields require that may be different from what we're looking at for STEM postdocs.
I could just jump off of what Alex was saying a little bit, thinking about like the deliverables. I mean, so I kind of feel like for, you know, for a postdoc, you're looking at like the research articles, and, you know, it's kind of similar in social sciences and humanities. Maybe that's a book manuscript or portions of the book. But still, it's like a written output. But I think when you're looking, and so when you're going into academia, those outputs, everybody understands them. You put them on your CV. I have a book contract. You can give them, you know, chapters 1 and 2 as evidence that you have this done, that you're going to make your deadline. We'll see. But but when they're, I think the bigger differences are evident when they leave, when they're going outside of academia and looking industry, because I think even in like STEM fields, in industry, a lot of those positions understand the academic type outputs. They understand the written articles. But if you're an SSH postdoc, your book manuscript or some articles that you publish, these don't hold as much weight. They're not as important as like the skills that you could demonstrate on your resume. That's just what I was thinking about, like how when you're leaving, or when they're leaving, if they choose to leave academia, that the deliverables or the skills or the things that they need to show that they've accomplished that's where you're seeing big differences.
Right. And I think just kind of in that vein, really being able to translate the skills that they have to whatever that industry that they're entering into can be quite a bit of a challenge. And so really thinking about, okay, not only are these their particular outputs, I know how to research in these different manners, but what does that mean as I enter into maybe a corporate environment? How might I be able to speak to those skills and how they would actually work in this new environment, and of which we often don't learn how that conversation goes, right? The language that is used in those different spaces, we don't necessarily incorporate in our academics conversations. And I hope that as we're thinking about us as postdoc officials, administrators, but also postdocs who are on in the audience, really thinking about how do we use the language of the industry we want to enter into and be able to um, you know, make those through lines with the skills that we are creating or the skills that we have.
Just want to add that kind of idea of like learning how to walk the walk and talk the talk in the field that you're going into. And I would actually say this is similar in whether or not STEM and social science and humanities, which is that even if you're going into, say, research and development, from being a STEM postdoc into a pharmaceutical company, you're still trying to figure out, well, is this kind of going to be a similar team setup? Is it going to be the same similar reporting lines and outputs? I think that with humanities and social sciences, you might have to dig a little bit deeper with just certain questions like, well, what kind of research are you doing in in a job that's consulting? Are you doing presentations? What kind of reports are you writing? What's the kind of deliverables you usually ask? And then reflecting backwards and thinking, okay, so do I actually know how to write these kind of reports? Do I actually present PowerPoints constantly because that's the way I deliver information, in my field? And so having that type of, yeah, exactly what Blessing's saying, kind of learning that the parallels and making sure you're investigating that.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I am sorry for being late. So I'm a postdoc in Society of Fellows at Boston University, and I'm coming from a humanities, social science background. I'm affiliated with African American and Black Diaspora Studies, and so as part of my fellowship, we have a weekly colloquium where we all meet and share work from our respective fields. So there's like a physicist. I am a theater performance person. Another person is a anthropologist or social scientist. So I think having those spaces and like being able to share one's work, or say if they have a job talk or an interview, like some of the skills we were talking about here, these deliverables, like having those conversations and being able to present your work to a wide audience is very important. Like for me, because I look at literature and performance, right? Like when I said, oh, I've conducted archival research in 12 archives in Southeast Asia, France, United States, like that like blew away the social scientist's mind because they're like, oh, that's like a tangible thing that I can lock down and I understand what you're doing now, right? Even though we're trying to translate and make our work accessible. So I think, yeah, having those spaces is crucial. So if there's a way to like cultivate that and make that possible in your different institutions, that would be really helpful.
Great. And I imagine there's probably, as we're talking about translating the skills that you have, there's probably also skills that would benefit folks as they're going on to job markets, especially outside of academia, that may not be as prevalent in the training in social sciences and humanities.
Yeah, I mean, I I'm at MIT. We do have social science and humanities postdocs, everyone. We do. Um, but something I've seen in a lot of the STEM postdocs is that they use the postdoc as an opportunity to pivot. So they bring this kind of foundational training from their PhD, and then they strategically choose a postdoc lab that's teaching them, say, a lot of them want to learn computational skills. So they pivot into a computational like AI ML sort of thing. Or they want to learn how to do more sort of like instrumentation kind of design and training. And so they switch into that. And I think that this is something that is really important for administrators and those of us in career development to kind of help support our social science and humanities scholars to think about, right? What is that extra kind of interdisciplinary skill that you can take on, that you can find in this new institution that you're doing your postdoc in? Is it, for example, that when you did your dissertation, like me, I just made a giant Excel sheet of all of my data? Well, maybe that could be translated in learning how to do R, Python, and making that and learning how to use data or coding. I mean, Robbins showed that a lot of people are going into user experience and interface. So being able to have, one type of sort of like additional skill that is sort of interdisciplinary that sets you a little bit apart, I think is really crucial and can really be marketable and help you kind of talk across disciplines.
I think, yes, developing a new skill, 100%. So take Alex's advice before you take what I'm going to say. Because I think there's also skills that, so I'm going to speak from experience here that, my PhD is in history. And I recently added some like project management training to my LinkedIn page. And it's incredible how people are like, wow, that's really impressive. And I'm like, is it? Like I've been doing this for over 10 years, but recently I went to some like STEM training at one of the centers at Syracuse University and got like this official micro badge, and so it's like official now. So two things, like I've been doing project management since I started my PhD. Doing a PhD is project management. Yeah, I'm seeing all the nods, so I don't need to go into that. And then so I started thinking more and more about this, especially as I kind of pivoted out of the traditional academic track. And I was like, okay, let's try this micro credential. And so I went to a training focused for STEM trainees, and everything they were saying was completely applicable. But it was really interesting how they were saying, in your labs, you're doing project management all the time. You guys are doing project management all the time. And as a humanities scholar, I never heard that. And so everything they were saying was applicable. I got the badge, I put it on my LinkedIn. I thought it really didn't mean much, but it does mean something to people outside of academia. They're like, oh, project management. That is a skill I understand. I don't know what your PhD in history means. Historical facts maybe. But I understand project management. So, also maybe thinking like do the really cool stuff, learn how to use some cool new tool, but then also help your postdocs maybe develop some of the skills that they already have and be able to give like concrete a micro badge or an example, project managed, and then describe their dissertation or something.
I mean, just to like jump in on that train, so to speak, is often we say, oh, we teach, and then that's it. But like teaching in a classroom where you've created a syllabus and you have even reworked it over the course of the 2 years that you're there, or really thinking about all that goes into what I think we kind of think of as offhanded parts of our job. They really are like really distinct skills that many people outside of the social sciences and humanities don't have the opportunity to engage in, particularly when we're thinking about postdocs and teaching. I find far fewer postdocs teaching in STEM fields than I find in social sciences and especially humanities, right? But even those social science folks who might not have who might not have been hired to teach, I always encourage them, if they can, to at the very least guest lecture, but if they can teach a course, a winter summer course, if they can add that into their program, that really allows them to employ all of the different skills that they've had, and then have something on their resume that might not be a badge, but you can speak to, and really does, I think, elevate people's trajectories depending on where they want to go. So that's just a little note of the skills that you're already probably engaged in. Just again, framing it for the audience appropriately.
Yeah, I love that point. Being able to frame or articulate, even identify and then articulate those skills that you have, because as postdocs, I mean, the skill pool is just so huge, but the way we think about it is so narrow. We talked about mentorship earlier, and I want to bring us back to the mentorship question. And this is especially salient for me coming out of Japanese literature, and I moved into a postdoc office. It took me a year to wrap my head around what people meant by mentoring when they talked about it, because it was never a word that came up at all anywhere within my department. Um, so, but there are mentoring needs, of course, that all postdocs have. How do the mentorship needs of social science and humanities postdocs differ from those of STEM postdocs? And, how well are faculty prepared to provide that kind of mentorship?
I will jump in.
Yeah.
I love talking about mentoring. I think that it's such a critical role, and many of us are nodding when you say like, what does mentoring mean? As someone who was in the social sciences, like as I learned more about STEM, graduate careers and as STEM postdocs, and like how engaged their PIs or their advisors are and on a more like, day to day, week to week, month to month basis is quite different than what I experienced and what many of the postdocs that I talked to experience, where, if they're meeting once a month, that's like a lot of meetings, right? Like that's a solid amount of meetings. But what does the mentoring look like when your advisor or faculty mentor is not specifically in your discipline? I think that's where a lot of the conversation that we have around like the hidden curriculum has the opportunity to really be supported for postdocs. So one thing is, what do all of these titles mean? What does a department look like? So for folks who are interested in faculty careers, you often only get a sight of one person, right? But the idea of having multiple mentors so that you can get a better sense of what, different disciplines look like, that departments operate differently depending on who's in them. I think there's such a wealth of need in the mentoring space, but often faculty in these spaces haven't had postdocs before. So they're like, what do I do with this person? And so having that conversation really early about what those expectations are, the help that you might need. Sometimes we don't know what we need, but sometimes we do. And so being able to, articulate that early on can be really important. I will not go on and on because I can. So I'll let others to jump in. But I think, as we've noted, that mentorship role is actually quite critical at this stage.
Yeah, I can jump in with my experience since I'm in the throes of it. So I graduated with my PhD in 2024, and then I just hopped the river. I'm in Boston. So I didn't move too far for my postdoc, and I actually knew my current mentor, for a while, which I think is pretty rare because we've been living in the same cities. We're in the same discipline, Asian American studies as well. And yeah, I would say again for the humanities, it varies the kinds of needs that, depending on if you want to continue in academia or go into alt-ac or museum, curator, etc. But I think one of the best things that my mentor said to me in the beginning, like right after I finished my dissertation, was you need to rest. Like you need to not like be super productive. You need to, if you're interested in writing a book after this dissertation, like you need to just put it away for right now and pursue other things, pursue hobbies, pursue interests. Because, as a PhD, you've been invested in this for the past 6 years and you just need to take a break. So I think listening to him really helped. And now that I'm in my second year, now we're like, okay, I'm putting together this book proposal. He has experience with presses. He has his book out. And again, like with demystifying the, academia, like no one tells you how to write a book proposal or how to talk to editors, like just no one does. You just figure it out. So again, having that mentor that kind of knows what to expect and also to share with you a sample of their book proposal or how to change up the length, like how to transition from a dissertation to a book was been super meaningful for me. So that's at least for me, because in my example, but yeah.
I think mentorship is also like near and dear to me. And like I'm very excited to talk about it because it's so important. And so there's like one aspect of this that's very personal to me. And I think it's because like I switched disciplines. I don't need to get into my whole story, but I kind of left my mentor network behind that was in history, which I had a very good one. So hopefully postdocs won't normally have done that, but maybe if they are moving from a different country or across the US, like they are starting from scratch. And so I just want to make a plug for maybe two things here. Maybe one is putting it in the postdoc's hand and teaching them or expecting or giving them guidance on how to mentor up. Because if they're so I'm thinking about situations where a postdoc is put into a situation where their PI isn't mentoring. So they come to a new university, a new institution, and they don't have a mentor. So thinking about giving them the tools to mentor up is important, and that kind of gives puts, I don't want to say puts the onus on, but like gives the power to the postdoc. But I also really think that established mentoring programs that give a mentoring cohort to postdocs is really important. And maybe especially important for SSH postdocs because they're dropping in. They're only going to be there for a short time. They don't have as much time to build a mentoring network. And then also because mentoring, at least in my experience, it's not as like I didn't hear the word mentoring at all in my graduate degree. I had really great mentors actually, but no one officially called it mentoring. No one was like, I'll be your mentor, or you should look to this person for your mentor. So I think anytime you can have a program for postdocs, that is like the best case scenario, because some postdocs might take, it's hard to find and this is speaking from experience, it's really hard to find a mentor as a postdoc because you're asking a lot of the mentor as a mentee because you're a postdoc and you take a lot of time. And you want to have people maybe like pre-vetted in the program that are willing to give that time because faculty are already pulled in so many different directions that they probably don't want to say no to a postdoc asking them for mentorship, but they probably don't have the time to do it. Anyway, those are the two things.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on kind of what Claire said, which is I also kind of left my entire mentoring circle behind when I switched from art history, archaeology to professional development. And, it's really important, I think, that it's really helpful and it's really important. I think this is why it's crucial for schools and programs and offices to think about ways to build cohort systems and structures and also tracking alumni and where they're going and sharing, and bringing people back in order to share, what am I doing right now? What are the things that I would really encourage you as a postdoc right now to do and think about and sort of make use of? Because it's really like what Claire's saying. You are asking a lot from a mentor, when you're just coming fresh in from it. And sometimes when you have a structure and it just breaks down a little bit of that barrier, right? That you're not having to kind of go through LinkedIn and then searching who went to this school, but then also what department they're in. But oh, well, last year, that person who's now in policy and works for Pew is actually coming in and doing a talk. Yeah, I need to make sure that I'm going to that lunch brown bag so I can talk to them. It just makes it so that the postdoc feels like they have an entrance into that. They can reach out to that person, but also that there's a sense of community and there's just a little bit of investment in there.
Okay, great. Thank you. We were thinking about, as we're thinking about mentoring, I think one thing that hasn't come up in terms of really empowering postdocs to be able to mentor up is the individual development plan. Does anyone want to talk about how SSH postdocs might take advantage of that?
I think I kind of started when we were talking about like as you're arriving to campus and you're trying to figure out what exactly am I supposed to be doing for this year, even though I might have written a whole proposal around it, right? Once you actually finish your dissertation and you get onto that new campus or even the same campus, then how do I really take hold of like this year? And I think IDPs really create a good framework to map out what that 1 to 2 years looks like, and it allows you to think of the skills that you already have and the skills that you wish to gain, and then really be able to have, I think, a concerted conversation with those mentors. Hopefully you have many, with many people who, are trying to help as you navigate through this. And I think all of us at some point have kind of talked about the idea of mentoring, but in the sense of peer mentoring as well, right? So if you're thinking about coming in as a cohort, the idea of like, even if you're not using the IDP with your mentor because you never see them, maybe you could still create an IDP and be able to work with others who are, in your peers or near peer spaces to really execute on some of those ideas. So I don't think many faculty really think about IDPs in the humanities and some of the social sciences, but I would definitely encourage any faculty members out there. If you don't already use it, please use it. But also for postdocs to, again, as you're driving your own career, utilize the tools that are available. And hopefully, if you haven't heard of IDP, now that you know about it, you will identify one. I can put something in the chat too, to utilize as you're mapping out that 1 to 2 or 3 years.
I just wanted to not to plug a different association while at NPA, but the Graduate Career Consortium also developed Imagine Ph.D, which is sort of the humanities, social science sort of variation of my IDP, which was very much kind of a sort of like lab science kind of oriented IDP. And that one I really like because it really helps you think about what are the ways in which you can link your skills, your values to various careers. Thank you, Victoria. Yeah, so that's kind of another way in which I want to share that there are resources for IDPs, and I definitely believe in an individual development plan. I definitely started one too very late when I was in a PhD, but I was glad I did it because it actually helped set my trajectory when I was a postdoc.
Great, thank you. I want to move us into institutional support of postdocs and how institutions might better serve postdocs in social sciences and humanities. A number of things have already come up, providing tools for postdocs to mentor up, to understand, identify what they need and get it from their mentors, to be planful about the time and training and what they're trying to accomplish. To be looking at skills that would increase their kind of interdisciplinary ability to do research or create networks. What else? Help faculty to think about what their role is vis-a-vis their postdocs. Helping postdocs to identify and articulate the skills that they have and translate them either across fields or into outside of academia. And then creating programs that help to build some structure around postdocs to create cohorts or have other ways that there is some structure that is centrally institutional. I think those are the main ones I've heard so far. What else? Like, what else should institutions be doing or could institutions be doing to better serve this population?
Man, if an institution does all that, the SHH postdocs are going to have a great time. They're going to have a great experience.
I think that what I would encourage, and this is difficult, so I know this is a very big ask, but also encouraging institutions to reach out to one another to connect their SSH postdocs with each other. Because oftentimes this is, and I think I saw this in a question about sort of the percentage of sort of SSH postdocs in the larger postdoc population. Sometimes this is a small group. And so the more that institutions can kind of find ways to create, say, geographic networks, or say it's like the UCs have their presidential postdoc fellowship, or, you know, the SUNYs can have kind of a system. Creating those kind of groups across institutions can also really help with building that type of community and sort of like brain circulation and kind of also feeling and bravery, right? For when they're taking their next steps, being okay with thinking about what are all their career paths they might explore.
Just to kind of piggyback on that point and draw in alumni, so that interinstitutional approach with interinstitutional alumni again broadens their networks across the board, and hopefully for those administrators who are in the room, that also allows for those of you who might be offices of one or few to be able to really have a larger spread and meet the needs of the postdoc community, whether that be regionally or is some other affiliation. I found consortia to be quite helpful in like the various ways in which I try to support my postdocs at my university. And that alumni piece can really be a great motivator.
I think that's a great point, especially as we're thinking about a reduction in resources across our offices. I'm going to put a plug in for Sphere. Victoria, if you want to throw some stuff in the chat, that is a good place to start to find other administrators who are thinking about these things and come up with ideas for other ways that there might be cross-institution collaborations. Does anyone have any last thoughts they want to add before we hit the questions? All right. Let me go back. There's a question from a social scientist who's a sociologist and considers themselves also to be in a STEM field. I think the question is, is there other language that can be used to describe non-social scientist and humanities scholars than STEM scholars? Would it be those in biophysical sciences?
MIT, we kind of, oh, sorry, Blessing. At MIT, I mean, the postdocs, if I just said STEM postdocs, I mean, I think some of my postdocs, excuse me, I'm an engineer. So, I mean, so, you know, we say engineering postdocs and our biomedical postdocs, and, you know, and so we actually kind of do more smaller splits in that way. And I do think that that's in some ways also kind of helpful in helping us think about language, because yeah, that's a giant conglomeration. So thank you for that question.
I wasn't going to have a great answer, but as somebody who's a political scientist, also STEM, it is strange to kind of split the language, just like you're either STEM or non-STEM. Like, and so most of the work that I do is open to all of our scholars, or, you know, all of our postdocs. I actually don't usually differentiate in that way, because I do think that people should be working a little bit more interdisciplinarily, yeah, anyway, than they already do, particularly across these different types of disciplines. So, point taken. I don't know of any specific language, and I do think that is really important to really think about all the ways in which we identify people.
I think that's great. And it really brings us to this next question. Not to say STEM versus SSH, but there is an imbalance between these two populations. How does that shape the everyday experience of postdocs, and what concrete steps can administrators take to level the playing field in terms of numbers and ensuring that the SSH postdocs feel supported?
So I had an answer to this before the first question, but so I was just going to say maybe, so like quick answer, or initially I was thinking like leaning on professional organizations for some of the support, the actual centers or schools that they're in, seeing if they can build out some specific SSH postdoc support. But thinking about that first question, I am very, like, I would not ever consider myself a STEM person. History, like, I don't know what a cell is. I told one of my postdocs the other day who works on T cells that he needs to explain T cells, and he explained it and I was like, I don't even know what a cell is. Anyway, I've been to a bunch of STEM professional development training, kind of just to suss out, like, it was primarily to suss out, is this good training for our STEM postdocs? But as a postdoc myself, with a background in humanities, I can't think of one that was not incredibly useful. So maybe it's about like thinking of rebranding, like a lot of these STEM trainings, unless they're talking like very, very, very specific, like they're applicable to SSH postdocs as well.
And I think that's a really important point, thinking about how are we using inclusive language and how are we conveying the value of the training that we're providing across fields. Jewel, I see you nodding. Is there anything you want to add there?
Oh, okay. I'm not sure if I read the question right, if like there's less STEM or if there's less humanities. Can I just get clarification about, is
And
there?
that there's just so many more STEM postdocs or positions
Oh,
for
okay.
STEM postdocs, then how are we trying, and also I'm incorporating the next question of driving more engagement of humanities and social science postdocs in the programming,
Yes. Yeah.
and just being more inclusive. Yeah.
So I am teaching an Intro to Asian American Lit class, and the majority of my students are engineers and business majors, and so I am proving to them every day why humanities matters. Um, so I think, yeah, I think it's a way of framing that. Yeah, we need more humanists. We need like as much as we need more engineers, like we need people that know the value of the people, of aesthetics, of art and culture, especially in these moments. So I think just emphasizing, yeah, I think trying to challenge the power dynamics that again, this is very Pollyanna, but challenging perceptions of what the humanity is, and also showing the value of the humanities in a university. I think that's kind of the moment we're all grappling with right now. So I think, yeah, showing up for people that are doing that work and are engaging with this.
Bridging the gap between these two questions as well. I think being able to, and it's very difficult when you're office of one, but trying to engage at the college or even departmental level. I've also been trying my best to reach out directly to those who are the faculty mentors to help them encourage their postdocs to engage in X, Y, and Z. I think for all postdocs, when you hear from your mentor, you should go to this event, or this might be really helpful for you. That is just like an added, added push to actually engage in whatever that is. So that's one way I've been trying to do it. Also, even as we're trying to steer away from a lot of text when we're describing our workshops, right? We're trying to streamline things, but trying to have some highlights that would kind of light the interest in a varying array of postdocs. I'm really thinking about this language, right? I don't want to say STEM, non-STEM, but the wide breadth of postdocs within our communities, really trying to have like a bullet for what I think or what I've heard from those different communities, so that they all feel like they will get something out of the event that will inevitably be open to all. So those are some strategies that I've been using. Have they been successful? I'm not sure, but I'm trying.
Great, thank you. I'm going to try to interpret Sal's question. In some fields, of course, the postdoc is a requirement if you're going to move into a faculty position. And it's not been seen as a requirement, and probably isn't a requirement in the humanities fields. What what are the reasons that people do a postdoc outside of fields that require postdoctoral training? And might prestige be a part of it? What are the other things, and how does that translate to how we can be more inclusive as institutions of these folks?
Yeah, I think from seeing folks that my peers that have gotten a tenure track job in humanities, social sciences, um, or not as represented, disciplines. So if they got a job and then a postdoc, usually they would be able to negotiate to have that year off. So especially for if having a book or articles for tenure is very important. That's why having that year off, just to again recuperate and rest, but also to start revising the dissertation, having that time to write articles is super crucial before someone has a 2-2 load. 2-3 load right when they first get out of the PhD. So I would say like that time is just so valuable and it's so important for scholars in non-STEM fields.
I can, I think there's some postdocs in both, and like all postdocs in general, that take a postdoc to kind of suss out the direction that they want their career to go in. And maybe that it's the same as like an administrative postdoc. So this is a plug for administrative postdocs. If your institution doesn't have one, highly recommend you convince somebody to give you money to have one. They're really amazing positions. So from the postdoc's perspective, from mine, it's like a training. It's just like deep dive into higher ed administration. And I get to do rotations in different offices within the Office of Research at Syracuse University, in addition to the postdoc professional development work that I do. And this is like, well, ask me in a year if I have a job, but I think it's invaluable training. So I think seeing it as like a training position, I don't know if that answers your question, Sal, because maybe it's just like already like inherent in a postdoc that it's training, but yeah, as a training opportunity.
Am I allowed to come off mute to clarify, Robin?
Go
Is that
go
cool?
for it.
Okay. I work with PhD students and postdocs. I work at Stanford with Robin. And for the I mean, I'm a humanist myself, PhD history, and the way I approached it when I was a PhD student and the way the humanities PhDs that I work with approach it is that they're applying to both. It's like I'm on the market, I'm applying to a postdoc, I'm applying to faculty, I'm going to see what sticks, right? I did the same thing, folks before me did the same thing, the students that I work with now are doing it. Whereas the STEM, and not to do this dichotomy, but the engineers, the biological scientists, they seem to be much more intentional. Maybe is a better word to think about it, about the way they approach the postdoc. Obviously, there's lots of changes that are currently happening with that pathway at the moment, given funding. But they're approaching it in such a way where it's like, this is the type of training that I need to do the type of career that I'm envisioning, versus the humanities PhD who is like, the next step for me in my scholarly journey is to either be a faculty or be a postdoc, viewing it as kind of one of the same, just looking like, what is that next landing spot? I definitely am painting this with the broad brush right now. I realize that. But I think for me, it kind of gets at the heart of like, how do I even advise the students before they get there to that? So it's actually not a question, I guess, about postdocs themselves, but the folks who are thinking about postdocing.
I know we only have like 1 minute left, but I will quickly let you know. So this is not like saying you're incorrect, but it's actually fascinating. A lot of the engineering postdocs at MIT have a job offer in hand, and they pushed back their appointment because they did not feel ready yet actually to run their own labs. And they were hoping that they could do a postdoc in order to learn, say, lab management and leadership, and sort of see if they can gain a new skill. So I think that when we're thinking about a lot of these, the reason why so many of these Society of Fellows and Presidential Fellows and these cohort groups are, they really bring in a lot of humanities, social science, is one, there aren't that many of these appointments, but also two, they tend to have structured professional development and exploration to let you actually start thinking very widely about that. So Sal, that's actually maybe one way you can really frame that, that's actually one of the ways in which the Society of Fellows and these types of postdoc cohorts are helping you kind of learn. And I agree with Claire, but I'm also biased because I was an administrative postdoc, it was another experience that let me really think about what was a way to career explore. So hope that kind of answers the question.
Looks like none of our other panelists want to jump in on that, and we are at time. I want to thank my panelists today. I think this was a great discussion, and I am so excited to have been able to talk with you guys so deeply about these really important questions. Amy, can I invite you to come and transition us to the next panel?
Thank you, Robin. Yes, I just want to thank all our panelists, thank Robin for moderating, and everyone for attending. Just as a reminder, our next session does start at 3:05 Eastern. It is a different Zoom link, so you'll have to leave this Zoom and go to a different one. But we look forward to seeing you guys in a few minutes. And again, thank you everyone for attending.